point is that Thomas Cook was not when you were chief executive, and was not when it went into liquidation, was not a signatory to the prompt payment code. I think your average payment terms were 60 or 70 days. So you were getting the cash in, but you weren't paying it to the people who had provided the service.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to come back to you on that, because we were not doing anything that wasn't standard practice in the time in that industry.
So we would have Thomas Cook. The problem is that everybody we've seen from Thomas Cook have blamed everybody apart from themselves. They never look at themselves and the decisions they've made and reflect on those. So it's the volcanic ash, it's the hot weather in the UK, it's the depreciation of sterling, it's the debt acquired by somebody else. It'd be really, really good to see somebody from Thomas Cook say to your customers and your suppliers and your employees, some of whom are sitting here today, we got it wrong. And I wish I could go back and done something differently. I wish we had disposed of some assets sooner. I wish we hadn't have bought my travel. I wish that we had made different decisions rather than just passing the buck to someone else. So I'll give you another opportunity, Bill Scott. Is it really the case that in 2019 that Goodwill was worth 1.1 billion less than it was just a few months before when you were CFO? Or should you, Mr. Scott, have done something sooner in writing down that Goodwill?
Based on the plans that we had at the time, we didn't feel there was a need to write down Goodwill at the end of 2008.
So the Goodwill values when I came in were at 2.66 billion, and as I departed, they were, a little bit less. And the whole process of risk, escalation, the amount of discussion around them at Thomas Cook, both at the committees set for them, was quite intense. Whether there should be a different approach, I think clearly, looking at what has happened here, there should have been.
This was a company that was in constant change and never ever really kind of found its feet. Manny, is that accurate?
I can't comment on what happened, Peter, after 2011 because I wasn't there. Prior to 2011, we had a strategy. We had a strategy that the board signed off to, that we implemented with the acquisition of the merger with MyTravel. It was a merger that was applauded at the time by the financial markets, by analysts, by shareholders, and we believed in that strategy.
Okay, leave it there.
2012, as I said, and the company was in 3 profit warnings, a wall of debt, etc. We embarked upon 5 things which yielded very significant results. The first was to remove that wall of debt in a way that didn't impact any of the stakeholders involved, banks, pension funds, etc. That 1.6 refinancing allowed us to significantly reduce the debt. The second critical piece was really to build a digital business. This was a company whose 1,000 stores did not even have a connection to enterprise-level internet. So in hiring the right people, developing the right data, and putting together a plan that enabled us to drive new clients, new customers, and the basis of an internet business. The entire industry had moved away from, and an entire generation who'd never been to a store. Secondly, thirdly, to make the business significantly more efficient. This is a company that negotiated with itself to buy hotels or to lease hotels. So to create centralized procurement, to create a much more efficient back end, and begin the task of reducing the number of stores that we had. That yielded a significantly improved debt position, a very much stronger cash generation, the first time in many years cash had been generated. These cost savings were beginning to enable us to take the next stage. And I firmly believe that all of those actions, if allowed to continue, would have positioned Thomas Cook very viably.
You were selling businesses quite soon after you got in. You
Indeed.
sold Thomas Cook India, gold medal. Was your belief then that the previous generation of leaders of the company were just buying too much, saddling with too much?
Thomas Cook at that time, 2012, needed to focus and not have a vast array of businesses that didn't return, that were hemorrhaging money, and we needed cash to invest. It was self-help, and that was very well received by those that either owned the company or were buying into it. About a 6-year plan.
Do you think, though, that Thomas Cook's never really had a massive asset base, but the transformation that you're talking about, the move to digital, still having a sort of rental relationship with other landlords, people owning property abroad. When you look at Toomey, that has today £4.5 billion worth of assets. They own ships, they own properties and hotels and all the rest of it. You never moved in that direction.
There's a totally different model that is much more asset light.
And it's a model that's still trading.
Sorry?
It's a model that's still trading.
Indeed, but there are also plenty of models that are asset light, that are digitally driven, that have attracted large bases of millennial, that are technology-based businesses that use, augmented reality to attract people in so they can assess the type of vacations that they're taking. That is a model.
My question is, were you transitioning to the right model?
I believe we were. The results after 28 months show. It was £2 billion worth of capitalisation from a business that when I started was less than 200 million. We had started to generate cash to grow the business in those key targeted areas, to add newer, younger clientele. And it was beginning by the results themselves to drive not only investor interest. You couldn't have done that refinancing if there wasn't an underpinning growth strategy that people believed in.
You were selling businesses quite a lot.
I didn't believe that my interpretation of what was meant was the critical element here. I mean, I was basically being told your services are no longer required and we wish to return to more travel, traditional orientated leadership.
I mean, after you left, when I Google your name, there's gossip out there as to why you left, and some people were speculating that there was friction between you and personality conflicts within the board at the time. Were they aspects of it?
Certainly, the board and I had disagreements around the level of assets, around the rate and pace of a digital transformation that takes, daily stand-up. This is changing the DNA of a business, just like I did at Premier Fontenla that worked over a 6-year period. So we certainly had differences of opinion. There were anonymous reports that the press made a great deal of. But in August of 2014, in the engagement survey, my rating from the employees was 93% favourable.
Do you really think those levels of bonuses were justified by the results that you gave the company?
I think, look, confirm again, they're big amounts, okay? Made up of cash amounts, shares, and some of the cash amounts of bonuses I received then are reinvested into shares. So, but nonetheless, they're big amounts. Do I feel they're justified? Well, at the beginning of every year, we set a set of objectives, very clear set of objectives. At the end of the year, we were measured against those objectives. The bonuses were published, and bonuses were put in front of the shareholders for them to review and to vote on.
I'll ask all three of you, looking back on all of your time at Thomas Cook, is there anything you regret and that you would do differently?
I think, from my perspective, after Harriet left, perhaps we didn't have the level of urgency that we needed in order to transforming the company, changing its business model, moving it more online, as Harriet said. I think we should have done that more quickly.
It's a company that I worked with since I was 18 and worked my way through to become the CEO of that company. It's a company I care deeply about. It's a company that I can't believe that doesn't exist anymore, and I hope it somehow Thomas Cook comes back again in some form or another. But looking back, do I regret things? Of course I regret things. I'm human, I made mistakes. No, I have no doubt about that. But I honestly, genuinely believe that the merger with My Travel was the right decision. I still believe, I've got to say, I thought Harriet did a a very good job in restoring confidence in Thomas Cook's to rebuild the share price, but I fundamentally disagree with her in terms of the structure of the travel industry. I think there's still a place for traditional package holidays, and our point towards Jet2, who in that time, since 2010 to now, built a business up to 4 million based on traditional package holidays, okay, and very profitably so. So do I regret things? Yes, but if I could turn the clock back, but I'd do things differently. I would do lots of things differently, but I think the major decisions, I just believe I've got them right, and I'm sorry the way it's turned out. But I believe that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, I think that to be in the position we're in is, for everyone, devastating. I think there are 4 things that I should have done differently. The first is that the rate and pace of a business transformation of this type, which was intensive for 28 months, I think I should have inputted more in terms of a board that also understood business transformations, that understood how to change business models. Secondly, we could have done even more to reduce the very heavy asset base. I felt strongly and had presented that investing money in something other than planes in terms of the very, very expensive things, and at the time brought together joint venture plans for companies like Monarch with our own airline, that changing the model to be less asset heavy in that sense would have been very helpful. And to have done more, we started with some of these amazing Apple-type stores with lots of technology where people would queue in Lakeside to make sure with their augmented reality that they could actually see the hotel that they would be staying in. I should have pushed that even harder and faster.
Do you think you have some responsibility for what happened at Thomas Cook? And if so, what is that responsibility? Manny?
Chair, as I said already, I think I've got the major decisions right. Okay, and yet the organisation is, collapsed in 2019. It was 8 years after I left, and I just feel desperately sad this happened. And
you feel sad, but you don't feel that the decisions that you made contributed. It's fine if that's your answer, but you feel sad, but you don't feel the decisions that you made contributed to its collapse.
I don't know.